at self-esteem is as a realistic, appreciative opinion of oneself, right? And so realistic, that's looking at things as truthfully as you can, not being overly negative, not being overly positive. Appreciative, that's recognizing the value. So, if you look at something like a cup, right? You could probably pay $100 for a special cup that was china and had some gold in it, but you could also get a cup at the dollar store for $1, and that has value too because you could drink out of that. In fact, you might feel less stressed out drinking out of the cheap cup than the more expensive one, which if it was me, I'd be like, oh, I may break it. I can't put it in the microwave because there's gold. And so, once again, you want to be able to look at yourself and appreciate yourself for who you are. If you are fragile and have gold, awesome. If you are very functional and, drink out of you, not that you're a cup, but the idea is that you're looking at yourself to see the value. And, with self-esteem, self part it's you. It's not about other people. It's not about what other people think of you. It's what you think of yourself. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Self-esteem can be thought of as sitting midway between self-defeating shame or humility and self-defeating pride. So the idea that for healthy self-esteem, there's this sense of equality. You're not looking at other people as better than you or more valuable than you, as you might with that self-defeating shame where you feel less than, or that humility where you feel like I'm not as important as other people. But you're also not looking down at people either, as with self-defeating pride, which often actually does come from insecurity. You're not like, I'm better than you, and so I get my worth from being better, right? Because you can probably guess that doesn't work out so well in the long term. So really, this idea of self-esteem is that healthy view of being worthwhile just because you are, right? It's separate from that idea of externals, So you can recognize that some people are more skilled at a sport, or, academics come easier to them, or, they're more likely to, be successful as a fashion model. It's not that you don't see that kind of stuff, or money. Some people do have more money than other people. It's that you don't tie that to your sense of self-worth. You separate those out. Research shows that our upbringing contributes a lot to self-esteem. So unfortunately, you can't choose your parents or the people who raise you, but if you could, choosing people who were loving and supportive and recognized that that people make mistakes and support you through that. The parenting style that seems to be most helpful in terms of developing healthy self-esteem is one that is warm and supportive, but also sets boundaries, right? To recognize that, I trust you, but you are going to make some mistakes, so I'm going to, give you some guidance here and some feedback. And so, one way, if you're wondering, if you're a parent out there wondering how should I treat my child, or if you're kind of looking back and thinking, did I have that? Did I have that growing up? You can just kind of ask yourself, well, how do I like to be treated? Right? And that idea of love and respect, those types of things we know are really important in development of healthy self-esteem. We also know that especially as people get older, peer influence, teachers, basically if you're interacting with people a lot in your environment, they can make a difference in your life. The good thing is, if you look back and go, whoa, I really was not treated very well, and I think as a result, I don't have healthy self-esteem. It's not like you're hooped, right? There are things that you can do to build your self-esteem. So I mentioned that one way to look at self-esteem is as a realistic, appreciative opinion of yourself. So one of the things that you can do if you want to build self-esteem is kind of take a little bit of an inventory. Focus on, what are your strengths? Some people find this really hard to do. If you find it hard to do, then you should do it because that means you could probably benefit from developing this. So, one exercise I like to give to clients is to try and come up with 10, things that they appreciate about themselves or that they value. Once again, sometimes people really struggle with this, and so then I would advise, what would a friend say? What would a person who loved you say? Even what would your pet say, right? That idea, that you're there, you show up, you take care of, someone, and, you can come up with more than 10, that's great, but the reason that I choose 10 is because I like the simplicity of, once you've got those 10 things, practice, meditate on them 10 minutes for 10 days, right? So once again, it's this idea of, with cognitive behavior therapy, practice, right? If you've had patterns that have been going on for years, having an aha moment can be really useful and cool, but you're going to need to practice. You're going to exercise that. So try that. Try to figure out 10 things you like about yourself, or even if you don't like that, you can kind of think I could like that. Just start small. 10 minutes, 10 days, and that's one strategy. Often over time, people can develop kind of like a harsh inner critic. So before we were talking about sort of this idea of automatic thoughts and that little chitter-chatter self-talk that goes on in your brain. For some people, it can be really negative, or at least it can go through periods of time where it's really negative. And so that can take a toll on self-esteem. There are some people who are, say, everybody loved me. Like, my family loved me, I have great friends, I have a good partner, I did well in school, and I hate myself, right? Sometimes it's just like the brain chemistry and, everything just comes together and it just was like, you just are not feeling good about yourself. And so this is a chance to, accept that and give yourself compassion and start working against that critic. You don't have to find the reason for the inner critic to start, trying to challenge it or ignore it, right? Or not necessarily ignore it, but I would say more of that kind of mindful approach, noticing it, observing it, not judging it, and not letting it boss you around. So that's one strategy, and you can use sort of basic CBT skills for dealing with that critic. I think one powerful antidote for that critic, especially when it relates to self-esteem, is compassion. In particular, self-compassion. So a lot of the people that I work with are very compassionate people. They are so kind, and they can see the good in other people, they're supportive of other people, but when it comes to themselves, they get stuck. And they're very, very hard on themselves. So once again, what would I say to a friend? What would I say to myself when I was 10? When I was a young person and that was happening. Often we look at previous experiences with that newfound knowledge. I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? What was I doing? And this is the idea of look back with hindsight. What was I learning? How was I growing? That idea of really using that compassion. Now, compassion isn't just something you have or you don't have. It's actually a skill that you can develop over time, and it involves things like understanding. Just really, really trying to understand yourself and other people, and just kind of giving yourself that room to say, yeah, you were having a hard time there. That was a hard situation. That makes sense. You did the best that you could, at that time. And that leads into acceptance, right? Sort of accepting that sometimes you get a raw deal, and sometimes things are harder for some people than other people. Really, rather than judging, kind of that acceptance, right? And forgiveness. Sometimes we do bad things, right? It happens, and then we feel bad after. The idea with forgiveness is that if you've actually done something bad, learn from it, and then case closed, kind of move on from it. say, I'm going to try not to do that again. I've learned from that. Don't continue to beat yourself up and feel rotten about it. Sometimes there's this sort of guilt gone wild, and this is where that self-defeating shame comes in. Not I did something bad, but like I am bad. You know, that core belief that kind of feeds all that bad stuff. You know, there again, recognizing that, you know, okay, there's that pesky core belief coming up and trying to boss me around. There's those, you know, automatic thoughts, but you know, I'm going to move forward, and you know, I'm going to lead the kind of life that I want to lead, that's meaningful and important. And I think, you know, that's key, is moving towards things, moving towards the things you want. You know, so ideally, everybody, you know, has love and unconditional worth, and as they go along, it's easier to grow in that way. When you have that healthy base, you're not like carrying around all this heavy baggage. It's easier to grow. It's easier to move towards the things you want. So the idea with, you know, CBT for self-esteem and for, you know, building self-esteem is to start that growth and moving, right? And if you can do that and build your sense of, you know, accepting yourself and unconditional worth, it will be easier. But you don't have to wait until you're feeling that way. Start doing things that are important to you. Start moving towards the things you want. You know, if there's a job application that comes up and you think, oh, I'll never get that, whether it's because, you know, if you're really not qualified, that's one thing. Sometimes you're not qualified. But if it's because you think they're not going to like me, or, you know, oh, I've already applied for a job and I didn't get that one, that kind of a thing. Other people, there's going to be better applicants. There's tons of people out there. Apply for that job anyways. You know, go on that date anyways. The idea is, don't let it stop you from doing things that are going to move yourself towards things you want. I don't have enough money for that trip and I'll never get it. Well, you know what? Start saving a couple bucks at a time. Open a special trip account so you can go somewhere you want to. Or, you know, think, okay, well, you know, it'll take me 100 years to go to that place. Well, what can I do that's going to fill that kind of desire? Well, maybe I'll go somewhere closer that's less expensive. Or maybe I can volunteer somewhere so that the cost is less and I just have to pay for my airfare, or something like that. You know, once again, start being flexible and start thinking, okay, what would I do if I couldn't fail? What would I do if I wasn't going to be rejected? And start moving towards that stuff, because that's the stuff you care about, that's the stuff you value.